David and I had a really great chat here. His history in change management really shines through as he points out that change done poorly can destroy a company culture overnight. And this moved into a conversation that really culture is the most important aspect. If we can get the culture right, then change can move with it. Hello, welcome to episode 3 of What a Future. As usual, we'll be talking about the future of work and the effects that has on us and on business and on life as a whole. Today we're joined by David Roberts. David's got 20 years experience in HR and managing with, working with people. He's been an interim chief people officer for major companies, including JustEat, WorldPay and American Express, where he's largely been targeted with driving change and modernizing these places and their workforce. He's now primarily working with exciting scale-ups in fast-paced, high-growth environments. And we're so grateful to have you here with us today, David. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, Fraser. It's great to be here. It's a real pleasure to talk about this topic, and no better time to talk about what issues and opportunities face organisations than coming into the new year, and particularly on the backdrop of all the news around recession and the different global macro news that we're hearing. So, no, pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's odd. It really feels like we've had a kind of year's worth of news in 6 weeks, doesn't it? At this point, it's quite crazy. Global recession, and now it looks like we might not have a recession, or at least we're not going to have a recession so bad. Maybe that's good news, but who knows what's going to happen around the corner? Yeah. So it really is fantastic. But no, very grateful for your time. And really interested to get into it. So let's jump in straight away with the sort of big question here. What is, in your opinion, the biggest problem affecting the world of work?
Yeah, and when you sent me the brief, I think problem is the right place to start. It's always good to articulate the problem statement, but I also see it as a huge opportunity on the other side of the coin. And what I want to talk to you about is change. And look, you're probably already thinking, if you listen to this, change, yes, we hear a lot about change, the cliches like change is a constant. But I'd actually argue that there's no better time to focus on this. And it's on the backdrop of organisations doing this very badly. I mean, I'm not going to mention any organisations, but if you take some of the big tech, or if you take some of the financial services, or some of the e-commerce or retail organisations, they've done this really badly. And publicly, they've been seen to do this badly. But there's many organisations I'm sure we don't read about that do this badly. So it's quite clearly a problem. And for me, it's a problem in many ways. From a commercial context, I think if you look at an organisation, it will affect your profitability and your revenue. It will affect your ability to retain your people, not just the ones that, if you're going through a downsizing, the ones that you have lost, but that whole survival syndrome, if you do change badly, they will want to vote with their feet as well. But actually, it's opportunity across a number of areas, not just the commercial side of things. It's really an opportunity to engage your workforce. And when I talk about change, this could be anything from the small level of change, whether it's a slight change to role, or a new program, a new platform being delivered, through to hybrid working, up to huge levels of change, which one side of the coin, you can have that negative downsizing. The other side of the coin, we're still seeing organizations being invested in, not as much as we've seen historically, but there's a lot of growth out there. But again, organizations not doing it in the right way, not doing it in a way that fully leverages their people. So for me, change is something we're seeing at the moment done badly. And I think it is a problem, but there is a huge opportunity for organizations to do it well and ultimately commercially succeed.
Absolutely, and as you quite rightfully said there, change is the only constant, and yet we, I think, as human beings, naturally fear change, and we spend so much time at work, and work is inherently linked to our life, our dreams, our hopes, and our aspirations. Ultimately, because it's, for most of us, it's what our income relies on, and so change, especially in such a sort of high stakes environment for an individual, can be terrifying. Change can be positive. Equally, change can be negative, and probably either way, change is uncomfortable because it requires a change in mindset, or a change in learning, or a change in habit. And so, as you sort of say there, being sensitive around these change matters and bringing people into being a part of that change and owning a part of that change feels like a sort of very important thing that, as you say, not everyone gets right.
Yeah, and the word I would like to use, which is an approach where I've seen organisations succeed, and it's that authentic approach to change. It's that transparency. If it's positive, negative, or somewhere in the middle, it's that really kind of open, honest, this is the situation, this is what we're going to do about it, please have your say, this is how we'll support you. And I'm obviously working a lot with a lot of scale-up organisations at the moment in technology, and some don't want to be that authentic, some want to hide it, and the ones that are really successful, and they get over that period of change, if it's a negative period, or they actually ramp up that growth period because they're so transparent, authentic. That's what's going to help people, that two-way communication and that ability to be authentic. So I'd love to see more of that.
Absolutely. No, I think that's absolutely on the money, and transparency there is the real kind of crucial word. I think it's very easy, as leaders, especially when you're tasked with going through a difficult period, to feel scared yourself, because ultimately, none of us know all the answers. We're simply trying to find the best way, and I suppose there's a fear of getting that wrong. And is it maybe that fear of getting it wrong that leads to people wanting to not, on a sort of human level, be transparent about things? Because if they hold the information, then in some way they also kind of hold the power.
Yeah, I think there's a number of factors. I think, generally speaking, I think it's about the culture of the organisation. I think if you have a culture, and as part of culture, you normally hire and celebrate leaders with the competence that you need, which includes the transparency and the effective communication. So I think it's the culture, where periods where you're not going through significant change, you are still being authentic and transparent. You may be having weekly or monthly Ask Me Anything forums with the CEO and the exec team. And I've been in organizations where you sit there on stage and you take some very direct questions and you try and answer them in the best way you can. You can't always be 100% authentic, because there might be certain things that you confidentially can't share, but you try to be as authentic as you possibly can. So it's about the culture and how much they establish a level of communication and transparency. But also, you're right, it's about the comfort level of the leaders. And I think, again, if you've got certain population of leaders that are not comfortable, you set up the support mechanisms to get them comfortable, and you take them through that. The other element, which is probably a bit more foresight or forecasting, is just try to see some of this change coming a little bit more so. Again, working with startups and scale-ups, they're very bad about seeing what's coming around the corner, because actually you have to pivot quite a lot. But there's certain things you could foresee. And even big topics like technology and AI, we know that it's coming around the corner. We don't know how quick it's coming around the corner. Big things like, is it going to remove certain roles like legal roles? Because actually, with some of the AI capability we see, they can pretty much have conversations on topics around legal content that's out there in the public domain. The same with employment law within HR. So if we know that that's coming, and it's not necessarily today, but do we cross-train our employees? Do we be authentic with them about some of these things? And do we get them involved in other things? So there's a little bit about the here and now communication, but there's also a little bit about what's coming around the corner and how can we help our employees in a way that's going to get them ready for something maybe they're not aware of. So there's many different angles you can look at change. And I don't think organizations are doing any of these in a particularly effective way at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've touched upon this before, that really, the world of work has not had a fundamental change really since the Industrial Revolution. We still have management structures. We still have a somewhat rule of, do as you're told, and, I've got the authority to make you go and do that thing because I've told you going to. And thankfully, we are seeing moves away from this into a more collaborative environment. But it is still somewhat prevalent. And I think, by sharing and involving people on a human level as opposed to just a robotic level, I suppose. Funnily enough, this is something we talked about last week on the podcast. That we are human, we make mistakes. Leaders make mistakes. Leaders should not be expected to have all of the answers all the time. They should be expected to create the environment in which they can find the way forward.
Yes.
If that is something that they do on their own, that's okay. But really, by having this kind of two-way conversation where employees are allowed to get something wrong every now and again, and so are the leaders, and we treat each other as human, then this softens the culture that you alluded to with regards to change, because everyone sort of expects, okay, well, let's all get together. This thing's happened. Let's go try and find a solution. I think this collaborative kind of method to change is powerful.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think you're right in terms of there hasn't been any landmark huge shifts in kind of approach to ways of working, but one of the ones that has shifted is the one we're talking about now. And again, working in the tech sector, I've seen this evolve over time, and the beauty of agile working, the beauty of, and then when I talk about agile working, it's that collaborative way, not agile working from a physical location point of view, although that has a part to play in it. It's that rise of more of the meritocracy, so not so much the bureaucratic hierarchies where you would be set an objective and it cascades down the organization. The use of things like OKRs and almost bottom-up kind of objective setting and shared goals. There's a big shift in that way of working, which actually removes some of the seniority, some of the bureaucracy, and it celebrates diversity and inclusion in many ways, not just from a gender or sex point of view, but from a seniority, from an experience point of view. And so that has added to a lot of change, because it comes back to the two-way communication. If you're getting everyone involved in a problem statement and a solution, then everyone's communicating in a way to try and find that solution. So I do think organizations have evolved, particularly in the fast-paced and the tech sectors in this space. But I think that could broaden out to other industries and across all organizations in a really effective way.
Absolutely. So just kind of we're sort of moving through this and establishing our sort of ideas for how we can sort of fix change here, which is fantastic. But before we move on to the second sort of big question, if we just kind of go back to where the beginning there, where we were talking about change and the way that a lot of companies are unfortunately not doing this particularly well. I think we briefly touched upon retention issues and productivity, but in experiences that sort of you've seen, how has this kind of poor change management affected the organisation, both on a personal and interpersonal level, and also the organisation as a whole?
Yeah, so again, not mention any organisations, but we all read about those organisations that let people go in a very inhumane way, and not even having conversations, the financial packages not being fair or reminiscent of the effort and the time that people have put in. But that's the bad way of doing it. And what that has is not just affect your alumni, i.e. the people that are going to talk about your product, your proposition, your service, your organisation to others, as well as just impacting their life personally. That's going to affect the people that have been left in the organisation. Not only are they going to think, oh, that's going to happen to me if the situation comes, so I don't want to hang around for that. I'm leaving now. And often the best people do think that way because they have opportunities. So you're not going to hold on to your talent. You're also going to impact the productivity of the people that are left there, because they're probably fearful that that's going to happen to them, which has a knock through to the commercials. Where I've personally done it well with some fantastic exec members, not mentioning the organisation, but we've unfortunately had to close a site before, and there's been 70 individuals that unfortunately they've had to lose their role. We flew out there and we had individual conversations with every single one of them, and we had an outplacement. We gave them a very fair market package, and a large proportion of them turned around to say thank you, and even gave us recommendations of the other city that we were building a development centre in. So that again, and when we built that development centre, we actually had people that relocated. We had people that were friends and family of that area. It was actually in the same country, so any of kind of the brand messaging, we're an e-commerce company, so again, the brand messaging from a commercial standpoint. So not only did we do the right thing by the people, it had a great cut through for the company as well, and but made me sleep well at night knowing that we did a good job there for the company, but also for the individual. So there's two sides of the coin. I think companies can be somewhere in the middle, right? But actually, if you take the extremes, it makes a point that if you do it really badly, it's an issue and a problem. If you do it well, it becomes an opportunity.
Absolutely, and I've heard plenty of executives say, and I feel it myself, that having to let someone go who doesn't want to go is one of the hardest things that we have to do as sort of business owners and leaders. And it's as you say, doing it with a little bit of humanity around you is really not it's not difficult. And can we not just expect this? I remember once having to unfortunately let someone know that it wasn't working out, and I sort of had the conversation, and it was just me and that person. And immediately we got out their CV and rewrote their CV together, and then I introduced them to a load of people, and they had a job within sort of 2-3 weeks. And we regularly catch up and see how things are going, and they say, "Look, I'm just so grateful for for that." And it's not this is the thing that I kind of don't understand. Like, okay, it requires a bit of time, but it's not hard. Like, it's not like you need to study for 20 years to learn how to be an empathetic human. But
the easy thing to do is just take the easy way out, right? Is just to spend no time with them, make no effort, deliver a quick message, get off that call, not even meet them face to face. That's the easy way out, actually. But yeah, I'm conscious we're talking about, I suppose, a very negative side of change. But I think the reason why I mention it is because it's prevalent at the moment. I know organisations actually last quarter, so Q4 of 2022, there was a lot of this, and we've seen it come into this quarter as well. I think we'll see quite a little bit more, whether it be recession or not recession. We're seeing a lot of change, so huge opportunity for organisations to do it well, I think.
Absolutely, and to be known as an empathetic organisation that do it right in this modern era, that's a commercially advantageous position to be in. Even if that's all you really care about, but having a bit of humanity as well just doesn't feel that hard. And so moving on to the kind of second question, then, if we could fix this, if we could enforce, good change management everywhere, how different would things be in 5 years' time? And what's the kind of picture maybe that you can paint of us of organisation and how that would work in a world where we can manage change much better?
Well, I probably like painting the utopian state more than I do like talking about the problem statement. But look, I think an organisation that does all the things we spoke about. So in 5 years' time, this organisation would have very authentic, very transparent leaders. There would be a clear method, cadence, and culture around two-way communication. As part of that, there'll be clear accountabilities for individuals and teams, but actually that would be the framework. There'll be, to your earlier point, there'll be freedom within that framework to operate, collaborate, be agile in terms of how they build solutions. Innovation is part of change as well. So that freedom to operate in a slight framework. Also, the point I made earlier, having the foresight and the forecasting around what change is coming around the corner, whether it be technology, whether it be your industry you're operating in, having a level of understanding so that you can manage that change effectively. And then as part of that, making sure that you're constantly cross-training, upskilling your teams so that they can adapt and pivot around all of that change. So I think in that kind of utopian state, I think you would have an organization that would have highly engaged people that would look forward to going to work, whether that be if we're fully remote at that in 5 years' time, or whether you're hybrid or as a culmination of the two, which I would foresee would be the case. You'd have a highly engaged, workforce didn't want to leave, bought into the purpose, bought into the leadership, felt it was a very, very kind of strong culture, but also felt that they were learning something on a day-to-day basis. Because I think with generations coming through, they constantly want to learn, digest content in different ways, have a thirst for learning, thirst for change. And actually, that's only ever going to amplify the problem statement we have now. But in 5 years' time, if you're building an organization with everything I've described, you're going to fully engage those people.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, the younger generation sort of coming through, and I know a lot of business leaders, again, we won't go naming and shaming, but ones that I've met that just sort of say, oh God, I wish the younger generation would stop coming through. Like, I don't understand. And it's interesting how there are always intergenerational differences are not new, right? The 60s happened, but we are now in a sort of a time when I think technology in particular, and the access to particularly the internet and computers more widely as well, being an integral part of the way that particularly millennials and Gen Z people have grown up, then the kind of expectations have changed. And one of the fundamental things, as you mentioned here, is the kind of access to information. I heard about a very interesting article that was pointing out that millennials and Gen Z, those who have had this access, have been bombarded with information all their lives because they pick up their phone and their phone bombards information at them. And so the idea of throwing lots of information at a younger person and asking them to kind of make sense of it, this is something that they do naturally, they do regularly. And this kind of, I think, is a good example of kind of the change, not necessarily in kind of business status of, maybe needing to make cutbacks or changing the way a system is done or whatever, but actually being open to the idea that the way that you're doing things now might not be the best way, and that there might be other ways out there, and you may not know them yet, and that's okay. But if you constantly have this idea that, I may not be right, like I've got this idea, I may not be right. In fact, there's a fair chance I'm not. Then this creates almost naturally this collaboration within a kind of authentic environment, and that I wonder, is that something that we would see sort of coming forward and building on this change?
Yeah, definitely, and I've already seen the rise of this in organisations, but particularly new generations, where you almost have this hypothesis-led approach, right? You don't come to. And many generations before, if I think of my father, I don't think he ever led with a hypothesis. He would lead with an answer, and you would get behind that. And he was the CEO of an organization. That was what cultures were built upon. You follow your CEO. But now it's like, well, actually, if as a CEO or an exec team, you go, these are the hypotheses we want to be tested. Go on, team, go and test them. Come back. Let's bat around some potential ideas. And I've seen that a lot more in organizations. And I think that can only lead to bigger and better things, because again, you're not going to be, particularly if you're in a senior role, you're not close to the product, the service, the customer as much so as other people. So if you can pose some hypotheses and you get the team to come up with some answers and some potential solutions, it's going to be more innovative and it's going to be closer to potentially the customer needs. And I think that's almost switched on its head a little bit over the years.
That's interesting, that sort of hypothesis-led idea, because, for a long time, as you say, the idea, I've got this kind of idea, go do this thing because that's what I say we're going to do. But actually, if innovation ultimately comes from asking questions, doesn't it, not answering them? Because if you, Henry Ford once said, I think it's one of my favourite quotes of his, he said, if I had asked the people what they wanted, they'd have said faster horses.
Yeah.
And so it requires you to go away and say, well, what if there is something else? He didn't invent the internal combustion engine, and trains already existed. What he did was take these ideas and make them into something new. And ultimately, of course, the thing he's famous for is making it mass producible and therefore viable in cost. But he must have started with the question, the what if we can do this differently? What if there's a better way? What if faster horses aren't the answer? and by posing that to a team full of people who have different experiences, different knowledge, and different ways of interacting with the world and technology and things around them, then that in itself creates this kind of perpetuation, I suppose, of change, whereby everyone feels that they're part of the outcome.
Yeah, and that's the ultimate goal as well. If we come back to engagement, if you feel, and this echoes through in personal life as well as work life, if you feel you're part of the idea, or even better, you feel it's your idea. Yes. And I swear my wife does this to me all the time, where it's clearly her idea, but she's made me feel like it's my idea. I have a big smile on my face, and I merrily go along and think, oh, I've decided we're going here, but actually she's already planned it. Then you actually buy into it a lot more. And that's been around in change for a long time. I've not seen it really done effectively. We've talked about, through my experience, you have change champions where they're kind of involved in it and advocates, which can work, but truly a culture that you are taking the team's ideas, to your point, and actually using them, and they can see that actually it was their idea, they're using them in the organization, it's made a big impact to the organization, the innovation has started from within. That culturally will show that they celebrate innovation and ideas from within the organization, as opposed to just being lip service, which you see a lot of. Again, if I come back to organizations not doing it well, or just ticking a box going, change management, yeah, we'll have some change champions, we will build a program plan, oh, we've got a comms plan, so that's okay. They're just ticking a box. It's truly culturally, it's all the things we've just spoke about, but definitely the ideas coming from within.
Absolutely. It reminds me actually of a funny way of putting it. I don't know if you've come across the 3,333 rule.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I love this one. So, any change starts with 3 months of conversation at an executive level before a decision's made. And that leads to 3 days of training for a manager, which leads to 3 hours of conversation with an employee, which leads to 3 years of resistance to the change.
By that time, things would have changed around you, and the initial problem statement would have changed significantly. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So, does it become the 6,666 rule? Yeah, I wonder exactly. At that point. But it's interesting. I think I certainly agree with you here that collaboration around change is the powerful kind of mission here, and a lot of this is about empowering employees and voices. I think. One of the things that I notice is that we have a kind of love-hate relationship with failure as a principle. And I've seen companies say, oh, well, we don't fail here. I mean, to quote Bob Ross, we just have happy little accidents. But I personally feel that we should just totally embrace failure. And anyone who's ever worked for me, I say, I expect you to fail. And actually, if you don't fail, I'm going to be a little bit worried because, one, you're human and humans make mistakes. But 2, actually, if you're not failing, you're not pushing yourself. You're entirely within your comfort zone. And so to have the culture that embraces failure and says, hey, not all ideas are good ideas, and not all things that we try are going to work. But let's keep going. Let's keep trying them. We'll try them in a kind of controlled environment. We'll maybe roll it out to a couple of people, or we'll create a little prototype, or we'll get whatever it is that you need to do in order to sort of test a hypothesis. By introducing that kind of almost thirst for failure, not that you want to ever try and fail, of course, but if you know that it's totally accepted, then that means that people can be much more open about bringing change forward and about getting ahead of things. If they see something coming down the line, then they feel that they can say something about it, because by nature of anything predictive, right, we might be wrong. Lawyers might be absolutely fine because of ChatGPT. Everything might be fine. AI might go away tomorrow. Who knows? There's always a chance that we're going to be wrong. And if we just embrace that, then that in itself, pushes the culture forward, I think.
Completely agree. And I think broadly speaking, this is about kind of psychological safety. And again, I know I keep bringing it back to culture, but this is something in an organization that you should celebrate, and you should make sure that you are creating an environment of psychological safety. And there's many ways and means you can do that. And often it comes out of the engagement survey. So one of the organizations that I spoke with, there was a clear worry and fear around this psychological safety. And one of the actual solutions that we put in place, which helped us improve the culture and improve the score in this space, was things like a Slack channel where people would post the failures of what they did this week. Even in the all hands, the CEO or whoever was running the session would ask someone to speak about their failure and what they learned from it, because that's the important thing here, right? And this kind of builds on everything we hear around Agile and the manifesto around failing fast. And so it's not a new concept, but I think broadening it out wider than technology-based teams and actually across an organization and in a culture leads to all the things we've just spoke about around innovation, buying into problems and solutions, but also not having any fear that you're going to get it wrong, because as you say, everyone fails in a certain way, whether they're a sports person, whether they're at work, at life. You just fail, then you brush yourself off, you learn from it, and hopefully not fail in the same way. So I think it's important that you let people know that. Again, for new generations as well, coming into organisations, work with a lot of people where it's their first job. Some people, unfortunately, have imposter syndrome and feel that they shouldn't be there. So failing is a real fear of theirs. So to have a culture where they can walk in and go, actually, it doesn't matter if I fail, as long as I learn from it and actually it makes me stronger, then that's a real positive. So fully agree.
Absolutely. And, imposter syndrome, I think the person that really made that, huge talking point was Michelle Obama. That's certainly where I first came across it. And isn't it incredible to think that, the first lady of America, felt imposter syndrome, and everyone feels it, right? Most people who tell you that they're not probably do, and they're trying to tell you that they're not. It's a sort of fair assumption. There are, of course, people who don't, but it's like I always like to think ultimately that we're all kind of here doing the thing that we're doing and hoping for the best, and we have different levels of experience and ability to go and do these things. But I'm fairly certain even sports people, Johnny Wilkinson steps up to I mean, he's gone now, isn't he? I haven't followed rugby in a while, but off he goes to to take his kick, and there's a meaningful chance that he's going to fluff it up. He's going to slip over. It's going to go wide. And even with all of the practice that he's done, that still can happen, and that's okay. The fans might not think it's okay, but for him, it really should. Having that kind of inner peace about the fact that these things kind of happen leads to a much stronger kind of psychological output. And I think that psychological safety. Google's work in Project Aristotle about that is very, very interesting and really shows that's the key driver in terms of quality of teams, isn't it? That if people feel that they're able to be honest, to fail gracefully and all of that, then that works. I mean, we've kind of straddled the issue quite nicely here, I think, because we've talked about change management in a kind of top-down situation, particularly with negative change and how to handle that, but also how that is affected by the culture. And I think it's hopefully clear with what we've been talking about that actually these things are intertwined. And if your culture is strong and people feel psychologically safe, because of these elements we've been talking about, whether that be fear of failure or recognition, all of those collaboration, all of those elements, then actually change becomes less scary. And I kind of rather hope that instead of saying, "Oh my God, there's some change that's terrifying," you actually go to work thinking, "Great, what can we change now?"
Yes,
like it becomes something exciting. Oh, that thing's happened. I wasn't expecting it. I don't really like it, but it's happened. Yeah. What now? What can we do? What can we achieve?
Yeah, and it's gone from the days where people are change resistant, because I think everyone now knows change is going to come at some time. They might be fearful of it, but actually flipping it on its head, to your point, is you chase that change, you chase that innovation, you chase for better ways of doing things. You're not fearful of failing, and you're supported by your leaders who are authentic and believe in a purpose that you believe in, and ultimately you have a culture that you're excited to be in. I mean, I want to work in this organisation. We've painted such a lovely picture. I want to go and work there now.
We have. Anyone who's listening who knows of these organisations, please call us up and let us know. I mean, I think that's an absolutely spectacular place to finish. I mean, what a world that could be. If we could get there, and I think we're not that far off, really. We haven't talked about any major barriers. We don't need to reinvent anything in order to get here. We just need to adjust the way that we look at things. And I think that's a really fantastic sort of message to have here, and especially with something so important as change, in the workplace. So it's been such a pleasure to have you with us, David. I'm so grateful for your time here.
The pleasure's been mine. Thanks, Fraser.
Brilliant. Cheers, David.
See you. Bye-bye.